law, but it's a kind of how society enforces it too. Because if you think we have been able to blaspheme against Christianity for quite some time in Europe, even if there has been some blasphemy laws that would really prohibit. Interesting enough, we are seeing that even if there are no blasphemy laws nowadays, we have some de facto blasphemy against some aspects of Islam compared to other religions. Then I think that this freedom of speech that you can have against religion, it's much more a social situation than just being enforced by law. I don't know what you guys think.
So, do you think there should be blasphemy laws?
No, I don't think there should be any blasphemy laws at all. But I think that it doesn't help if you just don't have blasphemy laws. The society must create an environment where people, if they wish, they can do that. Because even without blasphemy laws, in some societies it can be very difficult for some people to say something that can be considered blasphemous.
So, playing devil's advocate here, what about the argument that that blasphemy can be very, very offensive to people's personal beliefs of state?
Get the door. I come back in 5 minutes.
Okay, got right to be offended, but I fundamentally think offence is a good thing. I think it's necessary for having a bunch of mature adults in a society. And you've got to be able to scrutinise ideas. It doesn't mean you pick on people or you bully individuals, but challenging someone's religious beliefs is not doing that. So that's my opinion.
So, do you think there's any problems with blasphemy laws in the world today? I think Ireland still has blasphemy laws, doesn't it? You can't blaspheme against the Catholic Church. Didn't the UK have them until relatively recently? I'm just trying to remember when that was.
I don't.
So, more generally, with regard to censorship, do you think there's any level of censorship that should be permitted in a modern society?
That it should be civil protests against things we don't like, not legal ones. So, racism. We don't legally censor racism, but if someone's racist, you'll say that's unacceptable, stop doing it. So it's about civil protests, and there is a sense of what the society says, which obviously doesn't always mean it's right, but it's just very personal, and then I think that's it as well. That when we talk about the connotation of sort of being personally challenged by whatever is being said, and it's like that. So it's the same. It's the same with the Tim Hunt comments. That's funny, and it's like, well, it's not funny to you. That doesn't mean it's not funny. It's a personal opinion, and that's it. So something. It's like, I don't know if you would have heard it, but Sam Harris, the philosopher, made a comment, and I think it was deliberately provocative, but it was basically, he said that if hypothetical situation, I've got a wand and I can either get rid of all rape or I can get rid of all religion, and I wouldn't hesitate to get rid of religion. Now, people keep retweeting this as a sign of how evil Sam Harris is, but I'm not offended by that statement. I find it very interesting, but I'm not. There's nothing offensive in in his hypothetical to me, because I understand why he said it. But so these people saying that what he said is horribly offensive. It's horribly offensive to them. It's not horribly offensive to me. But the fact they're offended by it doesn't mean I should be, and the fact that I'm not offended by it doesn't mean they don't have a right to be. So that's the thing. I agree. It's very, very personal. What offends a person and what doesn't.
Yeah, that seems like something worth agreeing with. So there's a case where anything in theory could be offensive to someone. So trying to ban everything that could possibly be offensive seems like it's going to be counterproductive.
And I think that it's quite people both and plus weapons, so they can attack other people because they say that they were either offended or because they blaspheme against their religion. We can see this, for instance, in Pakistan, how many people probably they have not blasphemed at all, but they are attacked, and the excuse is that they have blasphemed.
So can you just repeat that? I didn't quite catch it. Sorry.
Yeah. Okay, sorry. No, I meant that both offense and blasphemy, they can be used as a weapon. A person can say, "Oh, I'm offended," and then think that this person that he or she has right to silence the person that is offending him or her. The same goes to blasphemy too. And I cited in text that we see a lot of those lead moves when it comes to blasphemy. It can maybe it's just an excuse for people, and then they use this as a weapon to attack other people. I'm not sure if I make myself clear.
Oh, I think did you want to add to anything, Mira? Is your mic working?
Hello, hear me?
Someone's joined. I'm just wondering what
Okay.
they're trying to say something or.
Yeah, they're being quiet.
Did you want to make a point, Mira, or?
I think Mira is having technical difficulties.
Yeah. Okay. I'm struggling to think of any other sort of facets of this discussion to bring up. Someone bounced some ideas off me.
Well, there's one I was thinking about. So I was thinking less about censorship and more about offence. So I don't know. I think the concept of offence is really interesting because what's happened now is that when someone says, "I'm offended," or when someone says that person was so offended, they're not. To be offended is to be insulted and to be challenged and to feel attacked. But what people often mean when they talk about someone being so offended is they are talking about the person's reaction to being offended. So when they said, "Oh, that person was so offended," what they mean is that person reacted in a negative way, in a really bad way, and sort of said, and so this very common idea, and I think this might be worth discussing, is the idea that you shouldn't ever be offended. And I guess it comes into censorship, but it's kind of more social. It's sort of this idea that you can't offend some people. You shouldn't be allowed to. No, I just find it very interesting because it's a very childish attitude, but it seems to be becoming more common. So, there's an idea.
So, I mean, I don't know who said this, but someone said that offence is taken, not given. Is that something?
Yeah.
That seems fairly reasonable. Did you want to use your mic, Doctor? Or? Okay.
We'll wait.
It's a slow day today, but so the idea that different ideas could potentially be offensive to everyone. There's certain ideas that we all dislike, that we all find perhaps rather irksome, but it's really rather impossible to tell what everyone's different irksome ideas are, and it's quite easy to self-censor. If you don't want to be exposed to an idea, then you don't inject yourself into an arena where that's going to happen. So it's not as if it's particularly difficult to remove yourself from that environment. But asking the state to do it for you seems like you're restricting other people's personal freedom for no good reason, essentially.
Yeah, no, I think that's right, and I think it's very revealing what sort of types of offence are allowed to go ahead and which ones aren't. So sort of getting this sort of crazy PC environment in universities where sort of, I mean, that's essentially what happened with Tim Hunt. They said we're not allowing sexism, but at the same time, this sort of Islamist radical preachers are allowed on, and for some reason, but it's because we don't want to offend them. We let them in. If that makes sense, so I suppose it's more in the case of who we are allowed to offend rather than what is offensive. And I think that's very interesting. Who we mustn't offend and who we must. Yeah. So that's what I'll say.
And I think it's not right that we have to be offended, because to be offended, it makes us think about our way to see, our way to see the world. I think that should not take out the other people the right that have to be offended.
Yeah, I agree. I think, I think being offended is fundamentally a good thing. It doesn't mean it's a pleasant thing. It doesn't mean that all things that offend are good. And it doesn't mean that offence is necessarily the wrong response. I mean, if you don't see offensive comedy, the idea is for you to be offended. And if you're not offended, they haven't done their job right. I think that if you go through life and you're never offended, it's a real sign that something wrong. Because I find there's something wrong. Because either you're so isolated from the rest of human society that you're just not communicating with anyone, or it means that you're not being challenged by society, and you should probably be being challenged one way or the other. So I think it's as important for me as science is, it's some kind of an intellectual stimulation in a sense. So I think it's a good thing.
So, so why do you think people feel so threatened by the prospect of being offended? So certain groups of people, that is to say, and certain groups of people that make it quite high up into the political spheres.
I think it makes it easier to play a victim card, and who doesn't want a victim to succeed when they can identify with that victim. So in the case of politics, you have people who play the they play the offense card like everything bothers them to no end, and there's a certain demographic of people who identify with that politician, and so they can automatically throw those people right in their in their back pocket and say, well, I got this demographic of people locked down because I say I'm offended by the same things that they say they're offended by, and that offense binds us stronger than anything else that might come our way.
So you think people enjoy sort of playing the victim to this sort of pseudo problem, but what's the advantage of that?
Well, I think you can get a lot of people on your side, right? Take any of the popular situation. Well, I shouldn't say popular, but some of the situations that we see online where somebody is either legitimately or maybe sometimes in question whether or not they're a victim of some, whether it be a crime or some offense, something offends them to the core of their values, and you see how very quickly certain groups who identify with them will run to their aid. There were how many times have you seen recently, because of the gay marriage thing, where a florist or a pizza store owner or somebody else gets all offended and they make a big public stink about it, and anybody who agrees with them on that stance throws their money behind them. So instead of pizza place going out of business because they have this policy that says we don't serve wedding pizza to gay people, they automatically, if they play the victim card, they are offended, whether they're legitimately that offended or not, but they end up raking in something like $750,000 in a weekend. That certainly can be a motivator.
It's quite common to be offended nowadays.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
Sorry, I think I cut the one which would come in.
No, you go ahead. Go ahead.
No, I just thought that it's quite a power nowadays to be offended. You can get the sympathy from a lot of people just because you're offended.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that we're at a time maybe in history where we've never been more connected to the remainder of the world, and so we're exposed to a lot of ideas, and some things that we're exposed to we find offensive, and I think some people can take that offense and ask themselves, why am I offended? What is it about this situation or this circumstance or this idea is so, what drives me to feel the way I feel about that idea? And then you can explore that. But if you're a person who just says, I'm offended, and you throw your arms up and say, I can't deal with this, just either get it away from me or I have to get away from it, then those things, they can get a lot of backing depending on what they are, depending on demographics of people you're reaching. So with the internet, we've been able to kind of broaden our horizons so far that you were able to speak with people, around the world. And being able to do so, you come in contact with a lot of different ideas. And if you're the person who is constantly offended by every little thing, you're going to spend a lot of time on the internet, fighting, with an old cartoon, right? Like, I'll be in bed a minute, honey. I'm doing battle with someone on the internet, or someone on the internet is wrong. It almost comes. Maybe we've seen it with some of the Christian apologists recently. Some of the more popular ones, they burn themselves out because there's so many things they're offended by, and so many of them pushing each other to kind of do this battle, do that battle, debate this person, have a conversation with this one, or do an 8-hour hangout with that person. And it just gets to the point where you see them burn out because they can only be offended for so long and have the idea challenged for so long that otherwise they actually have to evaluate their position. I think that's when we see people go through that. You see them struggle with the information that they're being hit with, and they have nowhere else to run to. There's no apologetic left. There's no answers in Genesis. There's no answers left for them, no corners for them to run and hide to. And so the only thing they can do is be offended, and then offended for as long as they can possibly tolerate being angry, they burn out and go away. The information that they're being
I can't say I've observed many burnouts. I'm not really looking for it. That's interesting that you see that happening. Yeah, has Ken Ham burnt out while I wasn't looking?
So, not really the big guys who, if I had to guess, those are the guys who they know enough to know that they're following, the people that follow them are the people that are going to line their pockets. If they have a rare, like a Cam or a Hovind or a Ray Comfort, if they break down and have a question or they say, I'm giving up or I'm shutting down my ministry, at that point they've admitted defeat on such a level that their financial stakes the remainder of their lives, I mean, they're never going to be able to do anything ever again. But you have a lot of the people who follow them who repeat their apologetics kind of just verbatim for as long as they possibly can until they've got nowhere else to go with it, and then there are some that just have nothing left. You know, I'm not talking about the people who are making money doing this, you know, being apologists, but rather the people who maybe truly believe it, but they're not in it for a living. They're just fighting the good fight, and so they see places in the world where they're offended by what people think, and they think they have the answer, and they go around and around and around and around and around until they burn themselves out, because there's no money in it for them. The only thing they have is their pride or their ideas, and once you've taken the ideas apart, then they all have their pride. And how long can you run on pride for when you're wrong all the time?
Not long. No, I wanted to pick up on something you said, because I'm one of these people that, you know, if I'm offended by something, I'll go away and think about it, and sort of mull it over and try and figure out why I'm feeling like that. But I wonder how much of it is due to the response to offence, you know, sort of this, you know, either going and mulling it over or being angry and raging on the internet about it. I wonder how much it's got to do with the culture, because, so for example, you know, I'm a practicing Christian and I'm not offended by 99.9% of all the atheists or anti-religious things I see online. You know, really haven't seen much, you know, seen a few things that were perhaps hurtful, but not anything that was really offensive. And the thing is, I grew up, you know, in England, and I was watching Monty Python and The Life of Brian sort of age 6, you know, and I kept seeing this sort of, you know, Christianity is very much questioned and poked at, and you know, there's in my particular denomination, there's a long history of us mocking ourselves. You know, we know these stupid things and we laugh at it. You know, it's funny. So that when people come along and say religion is stupid, we're like, it's taking you this long to realise religion is stupid. We could have told you that. So you know, and so we sort of, it rolls off of us. We don't care. You know, we're not offended by it. You know, and we laugh at ourselves. So, but whereas if you've been raised in a religious environment, and I mean, this is sort of fundamentalist Christianity, but also, you know, the sort of Islamism and in certain Muslim communities, where you never sort of question the religion and you never point out how stupid some parts of it are, and you never come across someone else of a different belief or from atheism who questions you, then I think that, you know, the reason a lot of religious people particularly are offended is because they are not used, they're simply, it's a different culture, they're simply not used to being challenged. And so, you know, and that's bad, but it's sort of like it's not exactly their fault. You know, they haven't, you know, we need a change of the culture, because the culture is not set up for them to be prepared for that, and not prepared for their arguments to be pulled apart, and not prepared for people to say, what's your evidence for X, Y, and Z, because it's just been unquestioned. So whereas, I was raised in a church where, we say, you don't make this sort of argument because it's rubbish, and that sort of thing. And actually fundamentals of faith are that the opposite of faith is certainty, and we don't know, but that's just a potential influence I can see on why certain people get so offended. But someone else talk.
I agree. Oh, excuse me, you can go ahead.
Oh, well, I think it was quite interesting that you mentioned Monty Python, because I believe that sometimes we maybe underestimate the tolerance level of people before they get offended. Because it's like the British comedian Jimmy Carr, for example. He says that to see what is acceptable for people in the society, you can just look at what kind of jokes can you make. For example, we can make jokes about the Holocaust and HIV victims. Nowadays, it doesn't seem that much. And we can even go as far to make rape fun. So I think we are far more tolerant, actually.
Yeah, well, I think it depends. It depends what you are making jokes about. So that's what I mean. That certainly in most British culture, you can make jokes about all sorts of things, and we're pretty chill about it. But the fact is that you do get a lot of people being offended, and sort of like I know someone who campaigns against extremism in Muslims, and he's a Muslim himself, and he put on Twitter one of those cartoons of the Jesus and Mo cartoons. And I mean, that's another example. I've looked through most of those, and I've yet to find one that.
Yeah. But when it comes to extremism in religion, then of course they are not tolerant at all. But what I'm talking about is the general public.
Yeah. Well, I think what it is, and I think Dr. touched on this briefly, is that when what the extremists do, because especially with Islam, you've got these people going after Syria, is they use offence to say, look, they're attacking our religion, and because I don't want to say that Muslims aren't the general public, but while there are a lot of liberal Muslims, there are also a lot of conservative, and they're not extremists, they're not violent, they don't want to overthrow anyone, but they are raised in a religion that says certain things, so you do not draw the Prophet Muhammad, and if you do, that's offensive, and it's sort of, so we don't make jokes about it, or we don't draw it, and people slam Charlie Hebdo for drawing them when they got shot, and it's like, so I don't know, because what my point is mainly is that Christianity in Britain has a long history of satire and being mocked, and so it's not offensive. It's very, very rare for something to cause offence. Whereas other things like Islam has not been subjected to that, and so it's sort of a self-perpetuating thing of they're not joked about, and then we don't want to cause offence, so they're not joked about, and so they don't learn to sort of be.
Exactly, and that's why I praise every comedian that makes jokes about Islam, because they need to be offended in order to learn to tolerate it.
Yeah, it's sort of like a sort of an immunisation. It's like sort of vaccine against being offended. But actually, I saw on Twitter today that there's a bunch of Muslim comedians doing a comedy show in London for Eid, for the end of Ramadan, and it's like the first time they've ever done it. So, hopefully that will help
Yeah, it's the same here. I come from Denmark. We actually have 3 very popular second-generation immigrants who actually makes jokes directly from the Quran. It's actually quite astonishing, and they don't seem to have any problems.
No, not at all. Yeah, and I mean that's it. That it's that kind of liberal. Yeah, and because most liberal Muslims will laugh about their religion and sort of. I don't know. I've seen things on Twitter, sort of like just Ramadan problems and sort of hashtag like that, and so it's making things more relaxed about the religion and making things more open to talk about, I think, and when you've got this sort of very strict, no, this is not a laughing matter. I don't know, it makes me very, very uncomfortable, but yeah.
One of the things that you kind of just reminded me of, or rather it makes me think about, is the situation in Iran, where you have a very, very strict, very conservative, very religious leadership, and the majority of the older population is very strict in their religion, but you have a majority of the population is actually under the age of 30 or 35, and they're not nearly as religious. They're much more relaxed about their clothing and their religion, and
they actually hate the old people. I think I heard something that Christopher Hitchens said something about that before he died.
Yeah, and it kind of strikes me as one of those situations where now there were before the internet, before we could all communicate together on an even playing field, we kind of had to rely on big media or state media in certain cases, or like in Iran, where everything is filtered through what the Ayatollah wants you to know. Then along comes the internet and open access to information, and you have a younger population who not only are they more capable with technology, but they're more willing to play around with those ideas, whereas, I don't know, at least in my experience, older folks tend to be a little, as we say, set in their ways and not so tech-savvy. So in a place like Iran, where you have these not tech-savvy old folks running the show, and a very young population of people who get it and who are more willing to accept new ideas, it'll only be a matter of time before the entire country kind of flips, where you're just not going to have as many old folks to kind of hold up the not the empire, but the whatever you want to call it, the religion in the state religion. They won't be able to hold it up themselves, and nobody coming up, the younger population, they don't really care to hold it up as strongly as the older ones do. So slowly over time, you'll see that kind of just, I think it will just melt away, and depending upon population and depending upon a lot of other factors, I guess, you can have, these changes can happen very quickly, or they can happen slowly over time. But as information gets to young people, I think we'll see slowly a march towards that more liberal, more progressive type mindset. But my concern, and this was the other thing that I thought of immediately, was when you have such an outreach through the internet where so many people can communicate and things can't be censored, you are going to run into individuals on both sides who are not yet ready to handle that conversation. And so their immediate reaction to that offensive comment or to that offensive cartoon or whatever is to immediately recoil and double down. And that's where I think you find these people who go extreme. They don't know what to do. It's kind of like if you're sitting at a stoplight, somebody runs up, you roll down your window, they punch you in the face, and then they run off. It's like, what the hell do you do with that? Do you move on with your day and ask, what the hell just happened to me? Or do you chase the guy down and get crazy on him? You know what I mean? Like, do you have other things to do? It's kind of that kind of mindset. Like Suzanne was saying earlier, you're the kind of person that's gonna take something offensive and walk away with it and say, okay, well, what does this mean to me, and how do I incorporate this into my set of ideas or what I know about the world? Or are you just gonna fly off the handle and get pissed and go wreck some shit? There's a lot there.
Yeah, no, and I mean it's very interesting the concept of people being offended by, I think, so there's often this phrase used when one of these older conservative Muslims is offended, they'll go, "You've just offended, all the Muslims in the world, pretty much, or however many there are, billion Muslims." Not that, but and things like drawing the Prophet Muhammad. A, it's been historically done, and B, in Iran and Turkey, they have icons of the Prophet. It's very much like Catholicism does with saints. They carry them around, and you can buy postcards with the Prophet on. And it's just that's what they do for their religion. And all these people saying, "No, you can't draw the Prophet Muhammad," and it's like, Muslims do. They do.
Isn't that the same case with Christians? Is it true that you are not allowed to draw Jesus either? Isn't there something about that?
No, not exactly. But it's more a case of in Catholicism, drawing is much more common, and sort of they because they have saints, they will pray to saints, whereas the concept of saints and saints guiding you is much less common. Sorry, quantum overlord opened capture, and now I'm panicking.
Oh, sorry. It's nothing to do. I've just been trying. I've been having problems. I've been trying to I've been trying to set it up since. But what I realised that I did was I set it so that people are muted on default, and I was just trying to sort that out. So sorry, it was it was because of the people that were coming in earlier.
Okay.
Carry on anyway.
Yeah. So no, there isn't any restriction on drawing Jesus, but it's more because in Catholicism they pray to saints and they have icons, and some people see that as sort of worshipping someone that's not God, or sort of, it's called iconography. I don't really get it, I have to say, but it's sort of because Catholics do weird things, and we don't understand why Catholics do weird things, basically.
But there has been in Christianity some practice that don't represent Jesus or anything, no?
I don't know, honestly. I've never heard of it. I've actually got a book called Christ for All People, and it shows the vast numbers of artwork that have been done across the world by many, many different Christian communities. So, I don't know, but certainly in Western European cultures, but then in all different cultures of the world, drawing Jesus has been all around the place. It wouldn't surprise me if there were denominations that were against it, and certainly Catholicism is the most flashy in terms of artwork, and so you go into the churches and it's all gilded and lots of bling, whereas Protestant churches tend to be much more simplistic. But I do not know of any denominations that are have that restriction on it. So when people say Muslims never draw the Prophet, it's just false, because they do. And they, like some Muslims, very much like their images of Muhammad. So it depends on culture.
We can find on the internet many drawings of Muhammad from centuries ago. It's interesting that the media listen more to conservatives, and just to this conservative point of view is silly.
Sorry, I didn't really understand what your point was.
Okay, sorry.
Not for the Prophet Muhammad, is that what you're saying?
What I said is that we can find in the internet, it's not difficult to find many drawings from centuries ago. It is not uncommon in some cultures, in some Islam, in some cultures, not uncommon, like in Persian culture. But I think it's interesting that the media in Western, they adopt that position from some Sunni sects that is totally forbidden to depict the Prophet, when it's not true. I don't know why they adopt that position. Could I make myself a bit clearer? Sorry for this.
Yeah, I understood you. Go ahead, Susanna.
Well, I was just going to say, I very much think the reason the media adopt the we won't draw the Prophet, we won't show images of the Prophet Muhammad is because they don't want to get it up. Because, and perhaps, I think the majority of Muslims in the West, well, not perhaps the majority, but loudest voices are conservative. They may not be violent or extremist, but they are saying, we don't want you to show the image of the Prophet Muhammad. But the problem is then, the fact is that they may not agree with the people who do want to blow everyone up, but both the people who want to blow people up and the conservative Muslims both agree that you don't want to show the picture of the Prophet Muhammad. So it's sort of a double win for the media because you're being seen to be not offensive to Muslims and also you're avoiding being blown up. So I think that's why they do it.
Well, I kind of got when I mentioned this, it kind of made me think, why does Western, if I understood this question or point, why does Western media, when given information saying that Muslims are offended by the pictures or portrayal of the Prophet versus the opposite, which, Muslims are not offended by pictures of the Prophet Muhammad, why do they tend to run with the side that says we're offended by this thing? And what made me think of was that media always loves the controversy, and so if you have two voices in a room and one of them says, I am offended by this thing you did, and the other voice says, well, whatever, I mean, that's your deal, go for it. The media always picks up first on the person who's pissed off and offended, and then they want to know why, and then it kind of becomes ingrained. Similarly to the way that there's a lot of confusion, or there seems to be a lot of different variations of the story as to how the United States ended up into the Civil War, whether it was all about slavery or states' rights, or it was this thing or that thing. And every area of the country kind of has their own pseudo-narrative, and they're all approximately the same, but it all goes to how personally involved your area was in that conflict as to how your story is spun. You don't want to be, like here in the South, well, not here in the South, but in the United States in the South, there's this, this idea of culture and heritage and all these things that states' rights that with the Confederate flag, and these people are offended by the idea that you would take down a symbol of what they see as their heritage, and they don't necessarily see all the heartache and harm and everything else that other people see in that image. But there's offense on both sides. Take it up, put it down. People are going to be offended either way. Just the media tends to take whoever's going to be the most pissed and who's most likely to do something about it. That's the story they're going to follow, because that's the story that's going to get them the headline news at the end of the day that says, X number of people shot, or X number of people stabbed, or X number of people trampled at some event or something or whatever. That's where the story ends up leading. You follow the drama and forget about the other side of the story for the most part.
I think I see what you're saying, and I think I agree with it, but I would also say that it's the popular thing to do to not have someone to not offend, but to not offend people. But it's this sort of what my friend calls illiberal liberalism, the idea that and it's sort of moral relativism, basically, that sort of, their belief system is that they shouldn't have to see this, so why should we, as the wicked Westerners, force that upon them? And it's a sort of, I have to say other than white guilt, but do you know what I mean? It's sort of that they shouldn't have to put up with this, I mean, it's us being colonial and forcing our liberal views, and why should they have to be liberal? And this is what it comes down to, I think, is people don't, don't want to expect the same things from people who aren't Westerners, for want of a better word. They don't want to be seen be pushing their value because we've got a history of invading people, and so any hint that is that we're forcing our views onto others because we so fear being called racists. And it's really interesting, and this is totally going to sound like a plug, but my friend's name is Majid Nawaz. He wrote a book called Radical, which was about when he was younger. He was an Islamist and he was a radical. He wasn't the violent one, but he was a political one. And he said in his book what they used when arguing with their trying to force. They called them racists, and they would deliberately plug into those liberal fears. And so what you get is, we're so afraid of being called racist, and we're so afraid of saying, that isn't right, or no, you can be offended by image of Prophet Muhammad, that doesn't mean you're allowed to shoot anyone, that we sort of give up our values because we're so afraid of this accusation. So I think with the media there is a real fear of being accused of being racist and being intolerant, and etc., etc. And so they bow to the non-white, the minority group, or whatever it is in that situation. Or if Tim Hunt bowed to the the woman who says he was being sexist, when he wasn't. But so I think that there's a lot of that going on.
One of the things that kind of reminds me of is the whole idea of like the big Christmas dinner with family, and you've got great aunt so-and-so down the end of the table, and we don't want to say anything or do anything that's going to make great aunt so-and-so, pretty aunt so-and-so, because they just don't want to be accused of anything when, they're the media, let them get accused of stuff. They're there to report and just tell you what's going on, not to be liked, really.
By the way, if feel free, Mordred and DPR to jump in, but it isn't. I understand I'm taking this metaphor too literally, but isn't there something to be said for not wanting to offend, your great aunt a couple of years before she might have dementia or whatever before she died? I mean, I'm not sure what that translates to in this metaphor, but isn't there something to be said for that?
Well, I think. I guess it all depends, but I mean, if the person that you're talking about trying not to offend, if what you're going to try to say or what you're going to try to do is maybe the family has a business, and your business is upon whether or not you make a decision, and you make a decision. If you can't even bring that up at the table because Grandma not only will be offended, but she has a large stake in the business itself. Even if it's not a large stake, but say she just decides she's gonna pull her weight, whatever it is. you can end up sinking the whole business just because you don't want to offend somebody. At some point or another, things have to move forward, and there's always going to be the oldest person at the table. And so should we continually wait until we're the oldest person at the table, and then, you know, once we're the oldest person at the table, we think that we'll be the ones that are saying, like, well, listen, we brought it this far, but we're not willing to go any further. Let's not discount the fact that eventually we'll all be old folks and set in our ways to some degree, and maybe not as willing to bend. Do you necessarily want somebody holding their breath to make a decision for you to just to save, you know, you a little bit of heartache? If I can dash the shit out of that metaphor.
I mean, you can see the change in generation, and I guess as a culture and also as religion. I mean, the cultures where extreme, you know, Muslim, the extreme sides of Muslim exists, needs to be a shift in the same way, sort of thing. Maybe you hope that the generation maybe that's in control and in power now is like, don't draw Muhammad, but you know, what are the things you can put in place so that at least the kids of those people aren't, you know, thinking, let's kill people because there's a picture of Muhammad. Maybe they're a little bit further along the line. You know, they might still have their tipping points, but you know, if your tipping point's a picture, we're in a bit of strife. So,
Can I just ask though? I mean, I know that you're from Australia, Mordred. It just reminds me because of that your government, didn't they just recently? I think it was a couple of weeks ago. They actually banned internet trolling. On the plus side, on the plus side, those tossers that came in earlier could be arrested. But you know, that seems rather over the top and really quite caustic.
How the hell would they enforce that?
Well, I don't know. I mean,
but that's the point. That's the thing you have to remember about, like, Australia. Once you come over here, I mean, it's people get in far more difficulty for law in the US for doing far less than what people do in Victoria, Australia. If you look at all the laws and rules and all that, it's according to any state. It's you know, it's reasonable and rational sort of justice system, I suppose. It's the idea, and you know, an idea of some description and a concept of, you know, rehabilitation before someone becomes like, you know, spending long-term time in prison, and a lot of sort of you know, programs for youth and children and Indigenous and Torres Strait Islander backgrounds, people who have economic difficulties due to that, which, I mean, we've done a whole lot of poor things in the past trying to help people out now, but yeah, I mean, I don't know, that's kind of how I see it. I mean, there's a lot of the rules, like, I mean, someone would have to, I think it's against the law in the sense that I think someone still has to sue the other person. Like, I mean, you have to take this to court, you know, you have to have this on your name, and you have to go up in front of someone and say, they wrote the bad things about me on Facebook. I mean, you know, it's got to be something pretty severe for you to want to have to go through that process. So I think that, you know, it's perfectly reasonable. I mean, if it's at a point where it's
Do you think that there are people that are going to take advantage of that situation?
Well, they're probably going to take advantage of the situation. They're going to have too much money. Well, they have too much money anyway, and they're only going to be impacting people who have too much money anyway, so be it. That's a little bit straightforward, but I don't know. Yeah, I suppose, you know, it's case by case sort of basis, and I still don't think that. I think it's not just trolling. I mean, you know, just writing any comments not gonna have. I don't know. I'm pretty sure. I'd have to look into it, but I'm sure that you'd have to do a lot more than just post something on Facebook.
Yeah, no, I think what I meant was, I guess, do you think that there are people who are going to use that as a means by which to gain by saying, oh, so and so offended me, and I'm now distressed and distraught, and I have all sorts of psychological damage and anxiety, and you need to cover this, that, and the other thing as far as expenses. Because I can tell you, here in the United States, if you make a law that says, you know, you can be brought up on charges because of trolling or because of, you know, writing a negative comment that's offensive, you know, as soon as you define where that line is, there are going to be at least thousands of people who are going to make an effort to find a lawyer that will pick up the case of, you know, internet trolling. Because there's going to be somebody that's going to want to bring the case. There's going to be a lawyer that's going to be willing to do the work for nothing, so long as you get a cut of whatever the financial stakes are at the end of it. And some of these things they do end up paying out huge, at least in the United States. I mean, they pay millions of dollars for like ridiculous things that happen to people, or that people claim happen to them, and it gums up the works.
Actually, because I recently read that a projection of an expand
discriminatory assholes, as far as I can see it. But they're basically being propped up by the religious right, because they share. So you have one business owner who's offended by something that they shouldn't be offended by, in my mind, but they are, and then they refuse to do business, and they take their offense, you know, because they're all offended. They use that as an excuse to play the victim of, oh, look at me, I'm being persecuted because society no longer agrees with my views, and look at poor me. And then in comes the cavalry. You know, it's the church-going public that just say throw in their $5 here, their $10 there. What's another $5 for a pizza place, or a cake store, or a florist? You know, they just, so it doesn't necessarily even have to be the law that comes in and you have to sue somebody. In the United States, you can just make a big enough stink about it on the internet, and somebody will, you know, pay your bills for the rest of your life.
I like the fact that the one fact about social justice on the internet is that we can call out these companies that are doing ridiculous stuff, but there's also that part that the assholes will also support the assholes.
Well, I mean, there's lots of companies that, you know, there's been bad press in Australia and their sales have declined, but they have a monopoly over that market, and they just ride the decline, and then eventually they're just still there. I mean, there was a huge thing going back recently. I mean, some of the companies, though, these days, like, get pressured into changing the product line, at least, or removing sort of harmful product or whatever from the item, which is kind of unique, I suppose. But yeah, there's a lot of examples of companies in Australia that just, I don't know.
Yeah,
They control
it can be a bad thing, like how the GTA 5 pulled from store shelves for no apparent reason.
Yeah, what's it like? I mean, I don't know much about the UK. Few people representing this.
Oh, that was in Australia.
I don't know where Quantum is. Quantum's run off.
It's because again, whenever you're asking something of me, it takes me about 10 seconds to unmute my mic. There's quite a lot of lag on my end because of the expert thing. So one example from the UK is that of course the ethical consideration is, in the words of Spock, the needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, and it's whether you want to go along with that. I can see reasons that you might not want to go along with that, and I think you could argue this either way.
Well, I think those laws are in place to protect the few. the few that will be hurt by this. Think about, big companies. If they wanted force someone to sell, and because they wanted a certain particular part of their company, all they would have to do is go around and spread rumors and lies on television. And I know you say that people would believe it. I'm gonna say that
We're not
people
saying that.
will
We're not saying that. We're not saying that. We're saying that it would happen. It would happen exactly as you're saying for a number of years, let's say. But then, however long that period is, it won't last. And then at the end of that period, it will just become a trivial thing to be making a lot of slam about something. So what will then happen for the next thousands of years, hopefully, it wouldn't be like that.
That's not how the human psyche works. People don't look up information. People do believe things on a whim. That's just not how humans think.
That might be that's might be an argument against this gentleman. Who's this guy? Is this
I don't know. I think I was. I need to find the source behind this, but I mean, I think your cry wolf analogy was pretty good. If you keep on crying wolf over and over and over again, people are eventually just going to. Every time you cry wolf, if they're only going to say there's a wolf here if actual evidence is provided. So.
Yeah, well, I mean, I was going to say the downside to this, if it did pan out like you say, would be there are times where there are wolves, and if we start not believing libelous, the accusation may not be libelous, but if a woman says, she's been raped by this CEO, oh well, she's just trying to lie and make money off him, that there's the other risk of that we will not believe genuine.
Well, no, but this is only for libel. So in some ways, it might actually be beneficial because they wouldn't have to worry about, for instance, there's every possibility that a rape victim might worry about a libelous accusation towards her. So removing the libel laws would mean that the victim would be more likely to come forward because they wouldn't have to worry about the libelous accusation, because the person who she is accusing cannot come back and say you're libeling me, so I'm going to in return file a civil law case against you and sue you for your life's worth. So you could actually make the argument that it would encourage rape victims to come forward, couldn't you?
Well, I wanted to say something about what you said earlier about people, not believing this. They might not believe it case for case, or locally they may not believe it, but globally there might be a different story. And if you don't know people, and there's this guy spreading rumors about you, I mean, look at what happened to Michael Jackson. The popular opinion swing against him, that swing for him, that swing against him. I think that removing those libel laws would be a certain disaster.
Well, I think we've pushed this back and forth. Again, it's not my argument. I'm not entirely sure what it would represent. Susanna, coming briefly back to your point, I think I kind of see what you're saying. I've just got into a muddle about this because it seems that it would prevent libelous accusations, but then if everything is trivialised, then people might be less likely to believe genuine accusations as well. So I think that's actually a good point.
That's kind of what I was aiming for, just the fact that it seems like the argument was saying that if people accusing, it's less about libel and just accusing people of things, and you're saying that eventually you'll get to the stage where we might get to the stage where people just don't believe them. Well, then you might have the case of genuine accusations for things not being taken seriously. But it's interesting about about what people believe, because I think that's the thing. We are very biased and we are very easily swayed by information, especially when information comes from people we trust. If someone says to me, oh, you should vote for this guy, he's really good, and no one tells me anything about the other guy, I'm more likely to vote for the one that I've been told is really good, because I've now got this piece of information that someone I trust also trusts this person and says I should vote for him. And you know, it really doesn't matter how sort of educated you are or aware of these things. So like there was a famous example, it was on, I don't know if you've seen it, but there was a documentary, An Honest Lie, about James Randi, the American magician, and he was telling the story about how he got two of his magic students, I don't know exactly how he knew them, but these two guys to go into a scientific laboratory and make the scientists think they had psychic power. And he said to them, if they ask you, are you cheating, if they're doing tricks, say yes, be honest, be truthful. But they were never art scientists assumed that they were being honest. They were participating in the sort of honest inquiry that goes on in science, and they weren't, but they never thought to ask them. So that, you know, very intelligent, you know, people can be utterly tricked, and I know whenever I say that around a bunch of atheists, they cough and go, yes, but you know, but human beings are very easily swayed and picked. You know, we cherry pick and we choose what we want to see, and so, you know, yeah, it just goes back to the original point about, you know, you might know that a libelous accusation is false, but no one else does, and we like drama and we like villains and we like to build stories in our heads. You know, that's what happened with Tim Hunt, and it's what happened with I forget his name, but the guy who's involved in the landing the robot on the comet and had that T-shirt, the shirt with the yeah. You know, and so it was jumped on. This is the story that he's sexist and therefore, you know, stopping women from going to science. And that's the story, and it's a story that these people just made up in their heads. But we like stories and we like villains, and we take that information and we say in our heads that it's the truth, and it doesn't matter that it's false. You know, to you in that moment. Well, you don't think it's false, but you know what I'm saying.
Do you think that there are people who actually, I mean, we mentioned this, I guess, on a past show, but people who wake up every day kind of walking out of the house waiting to be offended, like they're just looking for something to aggravate them so that they can jump on it? Or does anybody think that there are actually people in the world who genuinely enjoy in some way being offended, and that the only way that their life is complete is if they are offended, like they need that in order to like function, and if they're not being offended and then in return being whether it's aggressive or whether they push you, however it is that they push back, do you think that there are people who actually seek that out every morning, like that's their mission is to just get fired up?
Yeah.
What drives
drama? Yeah. And drama. I think that they're not looking to be offended so much as they're looking for attention. Just they'll be offended, they'll go on Twitter, this guy did such and such and such and such, and everybody right on or whatnot.
Yeah, not everyone goes on Twitter, but yeah, I mean, some people do that sort of thing, but there's people that, I mean, they just genuinely, it's like within like networks, like at work or school or wherever, they just have to cause conflict somewhere. You know, it can't be peachy keys. You can't just come in and do your job and go home, or come in, do your work, go home. There's got to be a conflict somewhere. Someone's got to be, you know, doing the wrong thing or saying something about someone else.
Yeah, I think for me there's 2 points. I don't know if it's about wanting to be offended, but I think there are some people who, you know, like, not as being offended, but I think when you're in one of those arguments, like we were talking, you know, just mentioned the guy with the shirt or Tim Hunt or whatever it is, there is a certain power to it. There is a self-righteousness. I think there is a rush of feeling that you're right. And, it's the same with like religious arguments online. People get passionate on either side. The ad homs are slinging, and there is a kind of adrenaline rush to it. So I don't know if it's designed to be offended, but some people like that kind of conflict-driven environment. So there's that. And then if you have been offended by something, or if you're thinking about issues, regardless of what it is, if it's religion, censorship, or if it's sexism or whatever, gender, if you're someone who's like just seen one example, and perhaps you got offended, or perhaps you got involved in the arguments, I think it makes you more likely to notice them, and so it becomes a bit of a cycle that you're in the zone essentially, and you pay more attention to it, and so the same person might keep getting involved in the same thing. So they're not going out looking to be offended, but they're kind of have become aware of whatever the issue is that they're concerned about, and so they're much more likely to pick up on little things and also perhaps see them in that light. And so that's how I see it.
When you get a blue car, you see blue cars everywhere. Kind of thing.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
It's just as you were saying that, I was thinking about when, particularly people. I mean, so this coming from different.
Whoops.
Okay, I think his mic cut out.
He just left.
I think he'll be back, but I've got to unhide him from the broadcast. Does anyone else want to make a point? DPR? You've been pretty silent, but.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I've also been away from the computer. Can I be heard?
Yeah.
You kind of
I'm sorry. And also, let me explain. The reason you're seeing it from a somewhat unusual angle is that my main desktop computer is packed up. Thursday, I think it was. So I'm talking to you from my notebook, which I haven't bothered to put into black and white and whatever. So I hope it doesn't offend you that you can see me in that. But to be honest, I was just, I've been away from the computer for the last 20 minutes or so I haven't kept up to date with what's going on. And as you'll see, I'm taking the opportunity to bring my keyboard, which now has absolutely no buttons on it whatsoever. And they're all in this bowl of warm water, which I'm watching. Which has got nothing to do with the conversation, but I just thought I'd bring it up to speed with where I am at the moment. So I'm now going through every single button. Computer, or my keyboard, which hopefully, if you're finding a problem with I'll get a button in the right place. Which would be a challenge. Okay. I thought there was some interesting comments, but there were so many different things to discuss. I didn't know whether I could wait. And I was thinking, Susanne was making a very good point about being insulted. I think that's an interesting issue. And I have to say that whenever I hear the expression I'm offended by that, I'm reminded of Christopher Hitchens. When whenever he heard that, he would say, yes, and what's your point? And I think there's something behind that. No one has the right not to be offended. I mean, it would be absolutely absurd if that was the case, because anyone can be offended by anything. There's a law about offending people, that would obviously be absurd. But I think there's another issue as well, which is to what degree we're going to get moderate Muslims on board if we are exposed to Islamic law manners, which a lot of moderate Muslims find offensive. Again, I'm really not that concerned that they find it offensive. I don't really see that as the issue when it comes to extreme.
ADVR?
Yeah.
You're kind of low, and we can hear you squeaking.
Oh, sorry, I normally use a good quality mic. You're stuck with my notebook mic at the moment, and I'm not even going to try and get the quality out. So if I can't be heard, I'll just pipe down as I speak, and I'll...
No, you're fine for me. You're fine. Just turn your sound up.
I don't think I can. I can shout louder.
That's fine. I meant more other people just turn the noise up on their computers. But yes, no, I think I agree on the insulted and on the points, and it's like the words "I'm offended" should provoke no more response than the words "I'm hungry." It's basically a comment on your inner state. And if someone says they're hungry, you don't rush up and go, "Oh my God, you're hungry, we've got to feed you." And just as someone says they're offended, you shouldn't rush up and go, "Oh my God, you're offended, we've got to pacify you." It's actually, if someone says they're hungry, you go, "Oh, do you want to go get something to eat?" And if someone says they're offended, you should go, "Oh, do you want to go and sit down somewhere quietly and think about it for a minute?" Or, "Do you want to talk about it?" Or something like that. And that's all the response you need. It's not something that requires a hysterical kind of response, that you seem to get with people who get offended, when yeah.
What I was hoping to do is to draw a distinction between those that act violently and those that say, "Okay, I'm not happy with that. I'd rather you didn't do it." And I think that we are ignoring the fact that there is clearly a difference. In this country, by which I mean England, you can have Muslims who feel so integrated in this country that they will play cricket, and there is nothing more English than cricket. And they will play cricket for the country and be absolutely proud of it. There are other Muslims who will feel that for some reason, and I'm not even going to go to what those reasons would be, but for some reason or reasons, they do not like this country, and they feel much more comfortable in getting over to Turkey and
Syria
or whatever, in order to join ISIS. Now, what I think is the interesting question, which everyone sort of like, well, no one, I was going to say everyone does it, but no, what I mean is no one seems to address that question. Why is it that some people are so comfortable and integrated in this country and are devout Muslims, and others aren't? What's going on there? And until we address that problem or that question, we're not going to find a solution to the problem.
Well, a lot of that would probably have to do with, specific opportunity for those particular Muslims. So, in regards to the cricket playing for the country, and I'm sure perhaps, I suppose it's a difficult question to ask someone outside of that opportunity, or, ask a Muslim outside of England, would you like to come over to England and live a life in England and play for the country? Versus what you're doing right now.
I think you're introducing a broader question. What I'm talking about is just one simple issue, and that is Muslims that are born.
Do you know about Marjan Nawaz? Have you read his book now? DPR, have you read his book Radical?
I've not even heard of him recommend his book.
No, well, then you'd be very interested, because he is a British Muslim who became an extremist and then deconverted and is now a moderate Muslim. He's a friend of mine, and in his book he talks about why he became radicalized. And what happened?
Inform me. I'll be very interested to know.
Yeah. It's a very, very good book, and it was sort of about how he'd been raised in Southend in Essex and had faced racism. And what happened was you've got these what he calls Islamists, who are Muslims who want to impose Islam over British culture, or over anyone, any culture, and have everyone, whether Muslim or not, be subject to Islamic law, like the Sharia law stuff. And he said, you know, so these people are sort of charismatic recruiters, and they all say, you know, you're not being shown racist because you're brown, you're not being abused because you're from Pakistan, you're being attacked because you're Muslim, and people are after your religion, they're after you for that. And what happened to Majid is that he was a teenager when the Bosnia massacre happened, and so here are white, blonde, blue-eyed Muslims being slaughtered because they're Muslims. So it's, you know, it's extra, and a lot of, you know, propaganda films and films of the violence and sort of, and so, but he said, you know, it was a political conversion, but they dress it up in this religious talk and say, you know, no, you need a caliphate, which is a political system because it's your religion. And actually, if you look at the Quran, the moment the Prophet died, there was war because no one could decide what the political system was. And the idea of one super state is a Western idea, you know, and they've hijacked it for Islam. So that, you know, it's actually quite separate from the religion. But and I was saying earlier that he wrote about in this book about how if people challenged them, they would accuse them of racism and accuse them of intolerance and all these things. And so they target liberal, you know, leftists who are so afraid of being accused of racist and stuff. So they, you know, they do tap into these this advantage. But yeah, so there's lots of reasons why, and then so I can't remember, but he gave a list of 3, and it was sort of perceived or actual grievances. I think it was identity crisis. So he was going through the identity crisis of, am I British, am I Pakistani, am I Muslim, you know, what am I? And so I think with your, you know, why some so comfortable with this and why some not, I think a lot of it's got to do with identity, it's got to do with the culture, and there's a lot of segregation issues. So Majid says he's met young Muslim men who don't have a single non-Muslim or friend of the opposite sex because they're so segregated into these communities. So yeah, there's some real problems. But so I think all those things can do it. That's why I'm again plugging for everyone to read Majid's book, because it's such a good book. And he's writing another one actually with Sam Harris, the American philosopher, about.
I'm sure if you want to push it as best you can, you'll include it in the description and subsequently.
Yeah, I've just in the chat. But no, but I was just going to say he's also just released his book with Sam Harris. Well, no, he hasn't. It's coming out in November. He's just written it with Sam Harris, which is about. It's called Islam and the Future of Tolerance. So it's them having a dialogue and a discussion on what's the next. How do we liberal or encourage liberal Muslims to reform their religion? So. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't myself. I think that's immensely important. Because I don't think that you can look at Muslims or look at the Quran and say that any interpretation is the correct one. I think that ISIS has as much legitimacy in claiming that they are right in their interpretation of the Quran as any moderate Muslim does. And in fact, my reading of the Quran suggests they have they've got it more right. Their interpretation is more correct than the moderates, and I think that is a problem, because I think that the moderate Muslim really does have to deal with what's in the Quran. I'm not an expert on the Hadiths, but obviously they are the writings of the interpreter, but the writings of the Prophet Muhammad interpretation of the Quran. But you can't say, so far as I can see, that fundamentally such advances have got it wrong. And, I think it's somewhat funny, to a degree, but only to a small degree, because the impact is quite horrific. But I think it's funny that ISIS and Al Qaeda can't agree. They're absolutely hostile to each other because they've got different interpretations of what ought to be done in accordance with the Quran. So yeah, I think in some ways, this has to be resolved. I don't know how it will be resolved. And I don't know what contribution the West in general terms can have on it, but any sort of discussions, I'm sure, can only be helpful. I don't know. I mean, this is one of the reasons I was so quiet before, because I can't come up with any solution to the issue.
Well, me neither, but Majid's got a organisation called Quilliam, which tries to address all these different issues like children going off to Syria and the problems of ISIS and stuff. And they've got theologians working on trying to provide a more moderate interpretation. But I agree with your point, and so does Majid, that there's a lot more in the Quran than, say, the Bible that lends itself towards the sorts of things you see with ISIS. It's got a lot that can be used. But then, I'm a practicing.
Everything justify ISIS's action,
Yeah. No, and I myself am.
Can I add to that? I think that if I, as a neutral, read the Quran, I myself would say that ISIS has got it correct, and the moderate Muslims haven't. That's the problem, I think. When you say that the Quran is the ultimate word that cannot be changed, then you're stuck with a book that preaches exactly what ISIS is doing. And it's a moderate that have to sort of like twist and turn the words to become a moderate. That, I think, should not be ignored.
Well, it kind of sounds to me like what you're suggesting is that the moderate Muslims kind of need to find an excuse not to be violent, so that they have as a response to what is a perceived offense. So kind of taking it back to offense. Western society does or says or behaves in a way that is offensive to people who read the Quran, whether they're extreme or moderate or just kind of folks just reading it for literature's sake.
I think that anyone that advances the argument that Islam is a religion of peace is disingenuous.
I would agree with you. I think what I'm hearing is that you have
doesn't verify the problem for the moderate Muslim who is aware of the contents of the Quran, who doesn't want to follow it specifically, has to find some way out of what's said in black and white in the verses. They've got to sort of like manipulate that. And of course they do that, because they've got loads that they need to rely on. But that's where you get fractions within the community. Some they certainly avoid, some ignore them, some play others all the way down, and so it goes on. But it's the moderates, I think, that have got difficulty.
Yeah.
Islam is a religion of peace. It's not. Read the fucking Quran.
Yeah, I would agree with you, and I think because they have such a hard fight to get out of what's said in the book, it seems, I haven't read the Quran, so I don't know a whole lot. I can only, kind of go what I've heard from just the community, the great debate community, in regards to it. But it does sound like it's really tough to kind of wiggle out of some of the really violent and the really nasty parts in that book. And so it's almost it becomes a very easy recruiting tool for these organizations like ISIS, because it's not like where in the Bible you can kind of say, well, it does say some pretty awful things over here and you should follow it. In the Bible, there's also the lovey-dovey portions where you go, yeah, but over here in this part it says this. And to me, my understanding is that there's not as much wiggle room in the Quran. And so I wonder, part of me wonders how many of these young people who join ISIS and join these extremist groups, just simply as a result of them being young and ignorant and isolated, they don't see.
I think you hit two things on the head, young and not ignorant, but disillusioned. It was not fitting part of the community. I think those two are very important factors.
Isolated.
Isolated, thank you. That's the word, yes. It seems to be the case. The majority of those going on to join ISIS in this country, certainly in the last couple of years, seem to be young. They do, on the whole, seem to be isolated. And I don't know whether there's any geographical connection between them or anything like that, but those two factors seem to be common amongst all of them.
It also is.
Why are they isolated? Is it because there's a sort of like culture of racism in this country, and in certain geographical areas perhaps more than others? I don't know. Perhaps it is.
I think it might be a condition somewhat of just being young and usually it's young isolated males who are, they've been told for some reason or another that they're being offended. Like, just take like a potential ISIS recruit. He's being told, your religion is being offended, your people are being offended, your holy lands are being offended, and all this, and your holy book tells you what to do in regards to these matters. And then the question then becomes, from the recruiter to the recruitee, what are you going to do about it? And to a young person, especially a young male who might feel isolated and offended, what's the first thing that they want to do? They want to fight. They want to get those people who are offending them. They want to stop the offense. They want to protect their own. And so they go off and they join. They're going to be the front line to prevent it from coming here, so to speak. It's not just an ISIS and Islam thing. I think it's something that kind of it's a condition that we see a lot of times in young men who are disillusioned with the world around them. Here in the United States, we've got a lot of the mass killings and a lot of the shootings and a lot of these rampages that go on are just exactly that: young, disillusioned men who, for one reason or another, they've taken up a cause and used their offense to go ahead and do a horrible thing.
Yeah, when I was, and I think most teens appear to a rebellious state. My rebellion was to have an earring, and I knew my parents wouldn't approve it. Okay? Now, that was the extreme of my rebellion. But these people are sufficiently motivated to rebel against the country that they grew up in, and to join a war, effectively. And they know damn well that they're joining a very, very violent group that has no concept of justice in the way that we would accept justice to be. They're joining groups that thinks that beheading people is perfectly acceptable, burning people alive is perfectly acceptable. I mean, that takes some strong propaganda, and ISIS is very good at it. But I mean, to buy into that propaganda, I think they must be deeply disillusioned with what's going on and their position in this country. And that's why I think we need to look at what's going on here to try and understand why it is that these people are prepared to turn to such an extreme organisation.
I mean, it's. I mean, the thing that gets me is it's not. Of course, it's not just young men. It's also a lot of young girls as well, which is something I understand far less, because I mean, I find it difficult to believe that they fully understand what's going to happen. You get these 16, 17-year-old girls that have got 7 decent GCSEs. They've got a promising education. Why would they possibly want to go to ISIS? I mean, as a woman, of course, it's much worse being in ISIS than as a man. So I can't understand, given the atrocities towards women in ISIS, why these young females would want to go for it, unless they completely didn't understand any of the consequences. So that's why I'm a little bit unsure about.
Well,
The bad boys, come on.
that's all you need to sway us. I would add that there are atrocities against women, but a lot of those atrocities are against non-ISIS women. So they're sex slaves, but the Yazidis, they're the infidel women. So, which isn't to say there aren't ones against the women who are going to destroy ISIS, but I think it comes back to this feeling of grievances, and it comes back to this feeling of identity, and I think the feeling of martyrdom is a very powerful one. So you say to people, you're going to go and join, you're going to fight for the glory of God, and your husband is going to be a great warrior in this battle. That is appealing. That is appealing to people, and especially, a lot. We say they're young. A lot of them are teenagers. When you are a teenager, I don't know about you guys, but I spent most of my teenage years being pissed off, and being angry, and being, laughing at people, and generally being a smug idiot. I think it's kind of them.
I'm not sure I've grown out of it.
Well, yes. I'll have to get someone else's opinion on whether or not I've grown out of it. But so it's sort of like, when you're a teenager, I think you are in a good position to, for want of a better phrase, join an army. Join causes and having a cause, and especially, but I think this is true for everyone, especially the idea that you're special, that just appeals to people, so.
Makes me wonder why people don't make rebel groups against these assholes.
Can I just go back to what Susanne said? I'm really sorry to interrupt, but I think that you're absolutely right in everything you said. And when you have the rebellious teenaging sort of phase, you're open to all sorts of ideas and rebellious ideas and whatever. But I don't think that without instilling in these people the religious virtues of following the Quran and ISIS's particular version of the interpretation of the Quran, you would ever get them to do anything close to what they're doing. It requires religion to take them that far. Yes, you can rebel, but to rebel for that between requires religion.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
I don't know if I can think of good examples, but I think it's perfectly possible without religion to be that devoted, because I'm just thinking of sort of when Marxism came about and communism, people were very dedicated to their philosophies. I'm not saying they were violent and necessarily blowing themselves up, but it might be the case that you do need religion for that, but I think.
Well, I mean, sorry, go ahead.
No.
Well, I was just going to add that if we wanted to take an altogether different example, we could have a look at the First World War, and of course there was nothing religious about that, and of course joining to fight in the First World War is not even comparable, because it was towards an altogether more, well, it wasn't an altogether a decent cause, but perhaps we can draw parallels there, because in the First World War in 1914, people volunteered to go and fight in France. There was of course propaganda, but largely there was people volunteered. There was this whole thing, if you went to fight as a 17, 18-year-old, I guess, you'd come back and everyone would love you, the glory of being a soldier sort of thing. And people signed up. I mean, there was of course the social pressure as well. If you didn't sign up, you were considered to be a coward, and the whole white feather thing. I might be getting confused with the Second World War now, but they were both I think similar. But in any case, in the First World War, by 1916, with the Battle of the Somme, people really realised how horrible warfare was, and the Battle of the Somme was just a complete slaughter. And I think they then introduced conscription, and people no longer volunteered. There was a shortage of soldiers, so then they had to go with conscription. But definitely at first, and I think this is true. I'm not sure if it's the case of the Second World War, but in the First World War, I think we can definitely draw parallels there, about the sort of military lifestyle, and that of course didn't require religion, but it was a war against an ideology, just as the thing in ISIS is, of course. So an altogether different one, but still.
Well, I think there's something to be said about.
Do you think it was a war about ideology, or do you think it was a war about geographical territory?
Well, it was the Second World War was the Second World War was more about ideology. The First World War was arguably there was still some ideological component, but the First World War was okay. I agree that the First World War was a lot about territory, but I mean, you could I think you can trace it back to the sort of you're testing me now. I'm having to rethink all the history I've learned, but the colonialists' intent of the British Empire, and then the German Empire sort of being envious of what the British Empire had, and there was this sort of competition between the Germans and the British that led to all this tension in Europe. So okay, yes, fine, but the Second World War was definitely about ideology, and in both cases, neither required religion for people to go and fight. And of course, they were fighting for honourable intentions, which is not the case here. But I don't think it matters whether the intentions are honourable or not. The whole point is that at the beginning of the wars, people wanted to go, but then towards the end, when people realised how awful it was, the conscription was required.
Well, there's something to be said about the glory of going to war, the glory of being a hero, and I think a lot of times young men get caught up in this idea of going off to war. They're going to go whoop the bad guy, and the whole idea of during the First World War of we'll be home by Christmas. A lot of the people who volunteered, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding was that in the First World War, a lot of the folks who volunteered were people of means. In other words, they were people who came from money. They didn't need to go to war. They didn't need the battle. It wasn't a matter of they needed the money, but it was rather the case of glory and honor and serving one's country. But as the war went on, like you mentioned, the Battle of the Somme was such a turning point, mainly because of technology. The battle tactics just couldn't match properly to technology at the time. And so that turned the corner where all of a sudden there was nothing heroic about standing with a rifle, walking across the field and being mowed down in the thousands. There's nothing, there's no glory in that. And so that's what changed the attitude. And it also changed the reason, why people go to war now. You don't have, and maybe in rare exceptions, you don't have the aristocracy, the upper crust, the people with money. They don't just sign up and go and join the military unless they're going to be in a position where they're not likely going to be catching any hell. Usually the people on the front line now are those poor son of a bitches who would otherwise be on a farm or in a factory. They have got no other choice. So it's not really, the only thing they could really make claim to at this point is the glory. That's all that's left. If you're just some poor farm boy from Podunk, wherever, then, I mean, what other reason is there except to say, hey, those people over there are offending us, and we'll give you a gun if you go and be a hero. And young people buy that, they buy that hook, line, and sinker, they swallow it up. Old, people who have had enough experience, or people who have seen war or heard stories or whatever, are more apt to say, like, you know what, to heck with that. But we do have a large group of people who now, beside the fact that they don't feel like they're integrated into their culture, they don't feel like their religion or their ideas are represented the way they should be. So they're now they're offended. Now they've got an extreme group of people who are backing them from afar, saying, "Come on, let's fight. This is for your glory. This is for your honor." And to boot, you get all this extra if you happen to die for the cause. Like there's something to be said about saying to a young person, you will have everlasting glory, in heaven for eternity if you just sacrifice this one small thing now. And so many people are not smart enough to just say, you know what, it's not worth it. I have a life to live, and I don't buy it. But so many young, disillusioned, isolated, and to some degree ignorant folks do buy into it.
Well,
what I was going to say, one more thing was that what scares me is the idea of people who are educated, who are smart, who have means, who go ahead and do these sorts of things. So like the 9/11 attackers, these people who are they're smart, they have money, they have the ability, and they still do it. So like if the driving force is the glory for them, I don't know that you could stop them. I mean, not obviously there's ways to stop them, but you can't stop them from believing that. At that point, there's only that motivation.
Yeah, I think that's so it also becomes what kind of an addiction where you go out and you fight, you survive, and they just can't wait to get back in the field, or they can't wait to plant their next bomb without getting caught. As a contrast, it's very different from the military today, our military, I mean, because the troops are so just not. I mean, most of our troops, I have this friend in the military, and he hates it. He says he lives in crapful conditions. They don't give him nearly anything. They aren't keeping up the contracts. That they said they would pay for his college. They aren't, and he's just stuck in this position, and because they won't move up because they need people in this position because nobody wants to be in that position. So he says he wish he would have joined the Air Force because those people get the highest living conditions, the highest paid wages. So there's a real contrast between that army and the rebels.
Is this a natural finishing point? Just because I was going to finish soon anyway, but it seems like
yeah.
This is a good point to finish. So I'm just gonna change the scene on explicit. Right, okay, so just to let everyone know, I will be re-uploading this to my to the Supernatural Side Salad Show channel, but unfortunately because of those assholes that came in at the beginning, I've got to go through again and edit that out. But if any of you lot are still watching, I've sorted this out now, so the next time we have a show, you can come in as much as you like. It's not going to do anything, because I know how to stop you from disrupting it now. I can, you're hidden from default, so there's no point in trying that again. Okay, so I'll do that, and thanks GPR for coming on. This essentially has been a fan show for the Magic.
I just have a question. Does anyone know where I put my buttons back?
I think you need to look at your manual.
No, I'm not that stupid. I just photograph the people before I took everything off. I will be alright.
That's fine.
There are people that think, yeah, I'm going to clean my keyboard and then take everything off. Well,
oh, I totally do that.
Do you know how many things and buttons there are on a keyboard?
Lots.
I think there's got to be 100 of these.
Depends on the keyboard.
I think I've got it. Well, I'm just thinking that is the sort of alphabet which is 25, 26. Yeah, it's going to be close to 100.
I'd say 80 or 90.
Yeah.
There's 26 letters, so yeah, probably around 50 or 60 for a standard keyboard.
But yeah, no, DPR, check out Marjad. I think you'd really like him. He's a really interesting guy.
Send me a link.
Oh, DPR was showing that picture of you with the big brain.
What?
I was showing that picture of you with the big brain.
Yeah, he's you have to speak to him. He made a picture of you. I'll link it to you in the chat afterwards. It's not my doing, so so
Yeah.
you
How do I send you a link?
I'll put it in the chat.
Okay.
Send it to me on Skype.
Cool.
Here, let me drop it.
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
you go.
and I'm sorry for again all the interruptions.